Hey, we are back now talking all things Iraq with Fred Kagan and also with Brian Katulis. Let's get now to the comments President Bush made this week where he compared what's happening in Iraq to Vietnam. Big shock to a lot of people to hear President Bush come out and say those words. Some see that as desperate rhetoric for desperate times right now. Without getting bogged down into each point-by-point comparison with that, what exactly does that mean if the White House is now going that far to start looking backwards like that, Fred?
Well, look, I mean, we've had Vietnam comparisons made since major combat operations. When we had a pause in operations, the New York Times started talking about.
But this president specifically said he didn't believe in those analogies.
That's right. We've been talking about Vietnam for a long time, and this has been worked into the discourse. What the president is now saying is, look, all those of you who are saying, look, we can do what we did in Vietnam. This is like Vietnam, and we can walk away. You know, it wasn't so good when we walked away from Vietnam. There was a huge humanitarian price that we paid over there, and there was a huge geostrategic price that we paid as well. And I think that's a valid point to make. He didn't raise the Vietnam analogy, but if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. Is that a
valid point to you, Brian? Can you accept that point?
Well, I actually believe that if we had stayed in Vietnam, there's a good chance we would not have won the Cold War. And similarly, if we stay in Iraq, bogged down in these civil wars, we're not going to win the war on terror. We've taken our eye off the ball in Pakistan and Afghanistan and other places, and we've harmed the military readiness. Our fighting forces. You see General Pace coming out with comments. He's going to advise the president. We've got to draw down forces next year. He's the top uniformed military advisor to the president. And I think that's more important than Senator Warner or any other politician's comments.
All right. Speaking of, let's get back to Warner's comments if we can. We all heard them, and we're mulling over what kind of impact they're going to have. We're all also waiting to hear what General Petraeus is going to say when he comes back. Now, having heard Senator Warner come back and after reporting on what he's seen with his own eyes, won't there be a pall of suspicion on anything that comes out of the White House if Petraeus comes back and says something the exact opposite? If he says everything is great over there, lots of progress is being made with the surge.
General Petraeus lives and works in Iraq, works 18 hours a day, spends 100% of his time working on this problem. Senator Warner goes over for a brief trip, goes around, looks around. I know what those trips look like. I spend more time in Iraq than congressmen do when I go on trips, but I know what those trips look like. I have to tell you, with all respect to Senator Warner, the guy that you want to listen to and the advice you want to rely on is the advice of the guy who spends all of his time trying to understand this problem, and not the guy who goes in for a few days, looks around, and comes back with the same opinion he left with.
Right. I think it's important also to listen to the folks over there. And you may have missed this because you're on vacation in Italy. But there was an op-ed of 7 soldiers in the New York Times last Sunday, which basically called it like it was. Said, enough's enough. Iraqis have got to step up to the plate. We've done our share. It's time to start bringing us home.
And by the way, I did see that op-ed. It was in the International Herald Tribune, by the way. But one of the things that also I saw this week and heard with my own ears was I heard a couple of generals who were being interviewed on CNN coming out and just saying it flat out in plain English. Democracy, not even an option right now. That is not the goal. That's not what they're pursuing. Right now, they just would be happy to have stability. That's a bit of a defeat, is it not, to say that right now that we have got to step back from all the roll-off rhetoric we heard going into this war, that's what it was all about, was installing democracy in the Mideast, and now saying, we'll be happy if we just get it quiet.
Right, and what I've got to tell you is when I went over there at the beginning of this month and I spoke with everybody from General Petraeus down to company commanders, the overwhelming sense that I got is that we're still working to try to build democracy in Iraq. We understand that it's not something that's going to happen overnight. We've had a lot of bad things happen over the past few years. We need to fix that, and we're working on that. But the goal remains the same. A couple of generals are making the point that right now we're not focusing on democracy, we're focusing on getting the situation stabilized. That's fine. But the troops that are fighting over there, they think that that's what they're doing.
All right, final word. Will Petraeus' report, will it even matter as much now after what we've heard and seen this week?
I don't think so, because you have several reports coming out. You have the NIE that was out this week. You have a GAO report that comes out September 1st. You've got people like Fred and me and others who have opinions, and you've got senators. And I think we've got a very complex debate on a very complicated situation in Iraq. But I think the fundamentals are towards change and starting to bring the troops home and focusing on more political solutions to that conflict.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Brian Katulis, Fred Kagan, good to see both of you again.
Good to be with you.
All right, have a good one. Take care.